Welcome back to Babel's Nonsense Podcast. It's me, Jonna, solo today. We're going to dive into why I have been MIA for the past 6 months and what's been going on. So if you're interested, stay tuned. If not, turn it off. What is up, babblers? I've decided if you listen to this podcast, you're a babbler. That's what we are. We babble, and this episode is literally going to be all over the place because I have no notes. I know I don't get prepared, but I typically at least have a list. In my mind, I know what I want to talk about, but that doesn't mean it's going to go that way because I've literally stopped and started this podcast 5 million times because my type A personality is like, well, it's not perfect, and it's not going to be. So if you want a perfect podcast, this is not the podcast nor the episode for you. So I'm glad to be back. It's exciting to sit down and just talk into a microphone. Y'all know I hate doing this solo. But for realsies, I'm sorry that I've been absent 4 or 5 months. That was not my intent when I took a break. The intent when I took a break back in May, you'll know the last episode was a heartfelt things that I was going through after dating a guy and making a mistake and, learning from that, apologizing, just talking about growth and being a decent human being and just, communicating. I went MIA and that was not the intention. But after May, let's back it way up. So y'all know from a previous episode that I left the ER where I had worked for 11 years and got a new job that was Monday through Friday. And so it was already a little bit difficult scheduling interviews since this podcast kind of got off track of how I wanted it to be. It was initially meant to be my verbal diary, and then it started being where I interviewed female entrepreneur businesses, which I loved. I'm glad it went in that direction, but I quickly found out that I don't like being solo on the mic, and maybe this go around I'll get a little bit better at that or more comfortable with that, I guess. But I loved it because I had a lot of friends that were female entrepreneurs, which honestly helped me for my upcoming adventures and new career changes, which we'll get into. So thank you for supporting this podcast still. If you still have me downloaded on your phone under the Apple Podcast or Spotify, if you're still following, I appreciate that. I appreciate all the people who reached out asking when new episodes would be released. That actually means a lot because sometimes I'm like, why would anyone listen to this podcast? It can kind of be very random, but I guess that's what podcasts are. You just you like what you like, right? So anyways, going back to what I was saying earlier, I went from the ER to a position Monday through Friday, which made it difficult to schedule interviews with other people's schedules and mine because I only had the weekend off and then, obviously the evenings, but I didn't want to schedule a podcast when I wanted to go home and, cook, clean, whatever it may be. So it kind of took a back burner. And I don't know. I was just not passionate about it at the time. And I'm growing as a person. Normally I'm like a super open book. But then when it comes to dating and relationships and, that's not necessarily my entire story to tell. Someone else is involved. So I don't want to breach someone else's privacy, I guess you would say, to talk about my life. But I guess there's a way you could do that and a way around that. And I'll try to navigate that the best I can. But anyways, so in July of this year, I found out the job that I just recently started in November of last year was coming to an end. The company I was working for, the physician had decided to take another job at another company and they did not need a nurse practitioner. So I had to find another position, which was something I never thought I would have to face in healthcare because just being in healthcare, you think you're always going to have a job, which I agree with that. You're always going to have a job. It just may not be the job you want, or it may not be the job in the city or state that you want it in. And the reason I say that is because in Huntsville, our nurse practitioner market is super oversaturated. We have 4 schools surrounding the area that are producing nurse practitioners, every 6 months. And a lot of nursing staff no longer want to be a nurse or a bedside nurse. They are either leaving the profession altogether, or they're graduating to become nurse practitioners, to advance their degree, to make more money, to have more knowledge, whatever the case may be. It's just an oversaturated market. So when I found out in July that I was losing my current position and the last day would be September 30th, it was a 2-month, it's 2 months because that date kind of went up to September the 12th. But I found out 2 months. So 2 months is very stressful, because that essentially means you need to find a job tomorrow, because you have to be credentialed for whatever facility you're going to work at. So credentialing meaning what you're going to allow me to do. Are you going to allow me to start IVs, to prescribe medication, to start chest tubes, intubate a patient? What is your facility going to credential me to do based on my board certification, my experience, and your facility and the state rules and such a yada yada boring stuff? And that can take anywhere from 1 to 2 months, depending on what company you're working for or what position you're working for. So I was very nervous knowing these things. Also, when I was in the ER and I was constantly searching for a new position, it took me over a year to find the job I found in November. So the experience that I had with that was very scary. Yes, I knew ultimately if I couldn't find a position, I could fall back on travel nursing, because with a nurse practitioner degree, you'll always be a nurse and you have to keep your nursing license up to date to be a nurse practitioner. And I also knew that, I live between 2 big cities, being Birmingham and Nashville. I had already done the whole move to Nashville thing. I was forced to move to Nashville when I graduated because there was no positions here. Didn't want to do that again. I knew how I felt with that. I knew I didn't love living in a huge city. So it was very y'all, and my anxiety, I have anxiety, but so whatever the case may be, it was a stressful time. There was no way I was about to put out a podcast episode. I've also learned with myself that I have to give myself a few days before I talk about something, or it's super emotional and I regret whatever I said. With that being said, I have 2 amazing friends. Well, I have a lot of amazing friends, but 2 amazing friends that got me positions with their company. And shout outs to Danielle and Lauren for being on the lookout. I immediately reached out to all my friends. They were sending me things left and right about the position. But they got me positions at their company. Sorry, I just got distracted because I had a text message from my aunt pop up on the phone or on my computer. And I was trying to read it and talk at the same time. Anywho, they got me positions, and it's just something completely different than I've ever done. I'm kind of being vague about it because I don't want to go into huge detail until I'm off my 90-day mark. Don't want to be fired from another job anyways. But it's contract work. So being non-benefited positions where you have to take your own taxes out, you have to buy your own health insurance, you have to do all these things, which I've been offered in the past, but always refused because I'm single, not married, I have to have the benefits. But after talking to some contract workers and, my aunt who's financially savvy and doing the math myself, I was like, maybe I can do this. Maybe this is the push I needed. Like if I didn't lose my job, I would have never taken a contract position, but I had to. I didn't have a choice. These were the only 2 positions offered to me. Well, there was a couple other that were benefited, but that meant I had to move. I had to move back to Tennessee, which I didn't want to do. I would have, but I didn't want to. Obviously, I'd have to sell my house, and all that comes with it. Well, regardless, I've been in these new positions since September, so I'm starting to kind of get the hang of them, kind of get the hang of my schedule, which is different every week. It's more of a self-motivated schedule. Maybe I'll do a whole podcast on self-employment. Because that would be, it's a lot that you don't think about, that no one teaches you. So that should be a whole nother episode. But with that being said, I'm hoping that I can keep a schedule with this podcast. That is the goal. I don't like doing anything if it's not perfect. That's why every time I sat down and was like, well, I can just do it introductory back into the podcast. But I didn't want to do that if I had nothing to follow it up with. So I have some people I've reached out to that know my schedule's kind of, chaotic, and I have some different things I want to bring into the podcast. I have, over the past several months, dated a guy, ended things with a guy, learned a lot about myself and what I want. And I started following a lot of, I don't know if you would say self-help on Instagram, but I'm going to play a lot of their things on Instagram. So I listened to a podcast, Coffee Convos podcast with Kale Lowry from Teen Mom, if y'all know her, and what's her name? Lindsay Chrisley from Chrisley's Knows Best. And they play like TikToks or things that they want to dive into. And I like that concept because I share a lot of TikTok reels, Instagram reels. I can't get into TikTok. I'm sorry, TikTok. I can't speak today. But I don't know. We'll see about that. And we'll share it. I want to have some guests on. I'm trying to talk my friend Kaylin and her fiance Jake into coming on the podcast to just have a conversation. It's really hard to do a solo podcast when no one's there to bounce shit off of, but we'll see. So with that being said, that is all I have for you today. That's all I got. New job and lots of other things to dive into with businesses that are open around Huntsville. I have some plans. We'll see if they come into fruition. But anyways, guys, until next time, bye.